I've been really inspired by a green recently. It's one that I'd seen in my parents' old film photos from an area in Yangshuo, China. And when I went there, I saw the green in bamboo, limestone mountains and rivers. And I started planning to use it in an artwork. When I picture it, this green fills the whole sky behind a full moon and a field of flowers. And I've decided that it will be the first thing that I try to paint in my new art studio. So I've been interested in painting for a really long time, but for some reason I've also always told myself that I can't paint. And I think I need to remember that anything I can do now was also something that I had to learn. I think I got really lucky with things like drawing because I just started at a very young age and there was never any expectation for my drawings to be good. I just had a lot of time to practice and enough trial and error until I eventually felt comfortable enough with drawing, and I feel like now I could figure out a way to draw almost anything. Photography is something much more recent. I hadn't actually picked up a camera until a few years ago, but I also never overthought the process, and I feel like I was just very open to experimenting and seeing where it could take me. But for some reason, painting is so different and I haven't had the same openness. I think at some point I started placing myself in known categories, maybe saying things like, I can draw, but I can't paint, when really I know that I've just had a lot more time to practice one over the other. And I always looked at people who could paint. So my dad and my grandmother both love oil painting, and my gunggong loves Chinese calligraphy. And I guess I've always seen them as people who could do those things. But this week we're just going to get over all of that, and I've decided that I'm going to paint right now. I have a whole series of paintings that I'm really excited to work on. Some of them are going to be more like a simplified, stylized landscape, and eventually I would love to try painting realistic landscapes as well. I'm going to share the whole process of one oil painting from start to finish, and we are really at the start because I need to go to the art store and get some painting supplies. The main things that I picked up were a small linen canvas and some canvas paper to test the paint before I move on to the larger canvas. I also got some sponges, palette knives, and a very deep green for the background. I found a few brushes and solvents, and for the rest of the painting I got the primary colours, burnt umber, black and white. Still planning it, I thought I'd give my dad a quick call, and I really just wanted to ask him whether he thought it would be possible to do something with oil paints. But before I could even tell him what I was planning, he actually just said that anything is possible, which I think sets the perfect tone for this. The drawing itself ended up taking a few nights to finish, but I think it gave me a good idea of how I should be layering the paints to create the gradient that I have in mind. I can also sometimes rush the drawing process, but for this one I really took my time, and I think painting it will help me to slow down and be a bit more present. So I think I've done around 6 or 7 layers of paint now, and the green is really starting to build up in the sky. I have left a lot of the canvas lighter because I'm planning for flowers to fill the bottom third, and I really want the lightest part of the sky to have a lot of the natural linen texture in the canvas. The feeling I'm going for is that moment when the moon is setting as the sun is rising, and you get that beautiful gradient in the sky and also a very soft early morning glow. It might not look like it at the moment, but this process has actually taken a few weeks so far, just because each layer takes quite a long time to put down, and it also needs a day or even 2 to fully dry before I can do the next one. It's kind of nice because I can just pick it up whenever I get the chance during the week, and there's really no pressure or even way to actually rush this process. I did make the mistake of rushing it once. I tried to do a layer before I was going out for dinner and I had everything smooth, but I also lost track of time, and just as I needed to leave, I decided to make one more change and smooth out one section, but I accidentally removed a whole bunch of paint, so there was just a huge sponge mark right in the middle of this perfectly smooth gradient. But luckily, because oil paints do take so long to dry, I could actually just come back that night and start to fix it up. I also really understand now why people start multiple paintings at once when they're using oils, especially while you're just waiting for others to dry. And I've already had an idea to try painting in a realistic style next, because we have so many photos taken in the same area that inspired this painting. But while I really am just waiting for paint to dry today, we can talk a bit more about the process of creating something new. I think sometimes the most pressing thing that stops me from trying something new is really just a feeling that it's not possible. And I think that negative feelings or limiting beliefs like this actually just feel safe, because as long as I'm telling myself it's not possible, I don't know how to do it, or I'm not good at it, I'm not actually expecting myself to take any action or prove anything different. And the more we tell ourselves things like this, the easier it becomes to just stay in our comfort zone. I think that negative thoughts can also sometimes sound more realistic because they sound definite and controlled, while positive ideas can sometimes sound unrealistic because they also come with a lot of unknowns and with risks. The possibilities they create really need us to go beyond what we already know. And the thing is, there might be a lot of legitimate reasons why we have those limiting beliefs in the first place. It's completely possible that we actually don't know how to do something and we haven't had time, but it's also true that anything is possible, and if we can reframe the limitations as opportunities, it's much easier to try something new. So instead of telling myself again that I can't paint, the first step really was as simple as saying I'd like to learn and knowing that that is possible to try. And on the other side, I think saying something as general as I wish I'd just become a painter or that I could already do it doesn't really acknowledge that there are a lot of smaller steps that we can take to get there now. I think if you want to take the pressure off doing something, especially if it's trying something new, it can be helpful to think of it as a trial and an intention rather than a goal that you've set. Because if you think about any skill that you have now, you also had to learn it. And if you look at anything that anyone has ever made, even if they're considered a master of their craft, they were still in the process of experimenting when they created it. They might have had a lot more practice, but every time they create, it's also an experiment in color and light. They might be making guesses for the very first time or trying things out as they go. But the one big difference is just that they've taken action, maybe many, many times, to actually create. So I've added the flowers and put some new blooms around the field. I also tried to test out my stamp in the corner just to see how everything fit around it, and I love how it brings the artwork together. I got the stamps hand carved in China and they're like artworks in themselves. They're so ornate, and it's also so meaningful to have my full name printed on the artwork. Unfortunately, when I stamped it on, it didn't actually work and only left a really faint line, so I ended up having to paint the stamp in, but I love how it turned out. There were definitely a few other things I picked up along the way and some other artists that have really inspired the painting. The first one is definitely texture. So I really wanted to have a natural raw texture showing through the painting, and I think that has come from a lot of different inspirations, but a huge one is Chinese silk screens. I love this one of auspicious cranes where you can really see the strands of silk showing through the ink. I also noticed this a lot in Japanese woodblock prints. My sister gave us these paintings by Hiroshige, and I love how much of the wood grain you can see in all of them. I have these artworks all around my apartment, so I was thinking about texture a lot, and when I started looking into canvases, I decided to go for a natural clear primed linen. It's actually been so beautiful to paint on because it feels more like I'm creating a stain, and I really love the way the linen has become a part of the artwork. So when I first started painting, I kept a stencil over the moon and painted around it, and I love that it now has a really huge area where you can just see the natural texture. I think the moon itself was also a huge inspiration, and also all of these earthy pastel greens. I was definitely inspired by an artist called Toshio Matsuo for the colour palette, and I also loved his paintings of flowers and used them as a reference. I might still have a few layers until the sky is dark enough, but in the background I've been starting to think about what to call this painting. I came across a phrase in Mandarin called YULI. It roughly translates to the energy that's left over for something else. It's about extra or remaining energy that you have after completing immediate tasks, like your work or your obligations. It doesn't sound like the most poetic phrase on a day-to-day level, but it made me think about the idea of the inner energy that we save for our higher pursuits. A few years ago, I felt completely stuck. Every day was the same, like I was just going through the motions and doing something that I didn't enjoy at all. I genuinely dreamt of having enough time to try new things, like painting, but I didn't even have the energy to take care of myself properly. I was eating dinner at my desk, barely sleeping, and had so much stress. I was burnt out and always counting down the days until the weekend, but when the weekend arrived, I was so tired that making time for things I enjoyed sometimes felt more draining rather than inspiring. But even in that exhaustion, there was always a huge energy that made me want to create more, and I gave a lot of weight to it. I realized that I would never be able to sustain a career like that, let alone be happy in it, if I couldn't build an uplifting life alongside it. I was so nervous to quit my job at the time, but I definitely needed to make that change and create more space. So I'm going to call this painting YULI, and I hope you can find a restful inner energy when you look at it. Like the wild irises, new ideas will bloom where they find space to grow, and where the moon sets, the sun can also rise. I've just framed the painting with this really wide natural oak wood frame, and I love how it sits together. I was sharing some parts of the process on Instagram, and a few people asked if I was going to make prints of this, which I think I should be able to organize. If you want one, please let me know, because I'm testing a few options between a matte paper or a canvas print with a really similar wooden floating frame. I also decided to make a candle to go with the artwork. I really wish I could share this scent with you, but it's a custom mix of wild iris, cedarwood and sandalwood. I think it's quite a soft floral scent and also quite earthy, which I think really complements the mood of this painting. If you've watched this far into the video, thank you for spending so much time with me here. It would be really great if you could subscribe to this channel because I have so many new artworks planned, and now that I've actually finished a painting for the first time, I'm really excited to see where they go.